Hey YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Welcome to Glen Innes, where once we had trains. On the platform, the signs are still there for the ladies' room, the station master, the booking office, the waiting room and tickets, and the bar. The infrastructure is still here, the station, the rails. Would you believe we still have the overhead standpipes and the water tank with its own standpipe to refill the steam trains that are apparently never going to come again. Up the train line from Sydney or down the line from Tenterfield. Nobody drinks at the railway refreshment rooms, which is what the RRR used to stand for. Although it clung on as a licensed restaurant for 10 or 15 years after the train stopped coming here, long enough in any event that it acquired satellite TV for the patrons. But no more do the trains come to Glen Innes. Now the high school kids walk backwards and forwards across the tracks on their way to and from school. John Holland can't find anybody to take the lease. And even the asinine notion of having the CountryLink buses stop here has been dropped, because the feature which once upon a time made Glen Innes the envy of all the other towns in inland New South Wales is no longer an asset. You see, back in the days of steam, it was considered a very good thing to have the railway line some little distance. That'll teach me to level my tripod, won't it? From the main street, which is just this side of the highway, which you can see there, working backwards and forwards. What that meant is that, unlike a lot of places, Glen Innes didn't have the steam trains running down the back alley behind the main street, so you didn't fill the town with soot and cinders and coal dust and loud noises. However, now the trains don't stop here, this place is totally derelict, and the buses go to the Tourist Information Centre in the main street, or actually on the highway, 1 block away from the main street. So now what used to be the station master's house is but a private residence, and what used to be the station store has become the knick-knackery, where it's spun out of a spider's bum, starring my mother cloning her brain on Friday mornings. Once upon a time there used to be a lot of prosperity brought to town by the railway. Not only work for the track workers, but every road crossing had a gate and a house for the gatekeeper. A lot of people were employed by the railway back before the tracks were padlocked and bitumened over, and the easement was closed off to trains, and then that railway easement was leased out to the adjoining landholders. I can remember putting my then fiancée on the train in Glen Innes in 1988, and I think it was about 1990 the last train came, and since then the sleepers have rotten away, the bridges have fallen down, and trees have grown up in the middle of the tracks. So the New South Wales government thought it was a great deal. The landholders get to graze on the land, they get to pay money to the government, they get to maintain the fences, they get to control the weeds, they get to develop a fire management strategy, and the government laughs all the way to the bank. However, then the tourist industry got involved. And the fantasy which is in the mind of the tourist industry is that they can take this railway easement, which runs 103 kilometres from Glen Innes to Armidale, And they want to turn this lease land, which was resumed for a railway line running through private land, they want to turn that into what they call a rail trail. And because they like to fantasise that the rail trail will bring an endless flow of cashed up nature lovers from the city who are going to travel 6 hours by road to Armidale so they can then commence to walk up the railway line, the people who are in favour of the railway or the rail trail have not spoken to any single one of the adjoining landholders, let alone anyone who might have leased the railway land which crosses their property. No consultation, no discussion of how to protect biosecurity from the point of view of animal diseases, plant pests, no discussion of what to do about the issue of some people having spent 10 or 15 years acquiring organic certification for their farms, while other people spray with toxic organophosphates and all kinds of agricultural chemicals. Absolutely no consultation, no discussion, merely a proposal, an alliance and a concerted media campaign which admits it's going to want to dip into the funding of the ratepayers of every council involved in order to try and bring about this land grab by the wannabes and the wouldn't it be nice ifs from the Tourist Association, because they've had a cargo cult brain fart to bring back prosperity by taking land which belongs to the public, which is leased and which is currently being managed at no cost to the government. And all that has to come to pieces because New England Rail Trail Association wants to float their brain fart. Well, unsurprisingly, with such a lack of consultation, many landholders have begun to protest, uniting a wide diversity of people who don't want a rail trail on the Great Northern Rail Line. Protests which have caused the Nazis and the fascists at the Armidale Chamber of Commerce to call for the removal of all such anti-rail trail protest signs because it's unsightly to allow advertising on private land beside the highway. But it's only unsightly when the advertising signs are against a proposal that the Chamber of Commerce and the tourist industry is in favour of. Apparently because the tourist industry is not at all interested in democracy. They're just interested in money and how much they haven't got. And of course, nobody in favour of the rail trail cargo cult actually owns any land adjoining the railway line, while nobody whose land adjoins the railway line or who leases the railway easement is in favour of the rail trail fantasy. But the cargo cultists have certainly annoyed a whole lot of people who actually live beside the railway line. And despite the fact that Adam Marshall is the local National Party MP and the Minister for Tourism, I don't think the cockies are going to sit still for this bullshit. I'm starting to get a battery warning on the phone, so we'll cut to the chase. From Glen Innes Examiner, Thursday, November 8. Business support for rail trail development. The Armidale Busyness Chamber, through its management committee, has resolved to support the creation of a rail trail along the existing railway line between Armidale and Glen Innes. Follows the publication of a strategic assessment of the rail trail developing the rail trail conducted by Mike Halliburton and Transfer Proprietary Limited. The establishment of the rail trail is a very significant development in terms of recreation for both local residents and tourists. The Chamber supports the trail on the disused railway line from Armidale to Glen Innes, a distance of some 103 kilometres. The prospect of the railway line being used again are next to nil. Being proactive and using the space for a rail trail will enhance our local community and help businesses in the region, generating an estimating $4.5 million each year. There are a number of stakeholders involved, including the Guyra Business Chamber, the Glen Innes 7 Council and Armidale Regional Council, which has now swung behind it. There is still much to be done with the state election looming. The next stage is to have the busyness case prepared. They've done no business case studies. A necessary step to obtaining government funding. In concert with the key stakeholders, the committee will seek financial contributions, up to a total of $25,000 from chamber members as well as non-members for the next phase, the busyness case. It is likely we will need community support for subsequent phases of the development of the rail trail. It is an exciting project that, when delivered, will offer significant economic return to our community. No proof of that at all whatsoever. As such, I see this as a project for the community as much as for Armidale Regional Council, and look forward to community support. Anthony Fox, Prissy Dunce of the Army Doodle Busyness Chamber. Whose self-serving, self-seeking, self-aggrandising claptrap and nonsense was very well rebutted in Glen Innes Examiner of Thursday, November 15. Where and at on the opinion page in the Your Say column, distance a problem. The rail trails in Victoria are viable because they are a convenient 2-hour drive from Melbourne. Trails in the Otago region are moderately successful in the summer, where there is spectacular scenery. In contrast, to travel 6 hours from Sydney to ride on what is basically a tableland, a large portion of which is paralleled by a public road, may not be all that attractive. On a cost-benefit analysis, I would be very sceptically wary of this venture. Brian Jeffrey, Glen Innes. You'll notice that all the early proposals were for a walking trail. Now they're talking about a mountain bike trail. Some people have suggested that there will be an 8-foot wide bike path constructed where the railway line currently is, or used to be, or is deteriorating. I don't know how that's going to work. Other people have suggested that the proponents of the rail trail will have to fence the rail easement corridor off from all of the farms. Don't know how that's going to work. What I do know is that there's a bunch of people who are really upset at the idea of the biosecurity risk, both animal biosecurity with animal diseases and plant biosecurity with weed seeds, and also the chemical biosecurity or the organic farming risks. Another risk which nobody seems to want to talk about is that posed by the prospect of permitting townies to get off the roads out into farmland without having to go on the roads. Because at the moment, one of the reasons why nobody tries to plant illegal weeds in the road reserve is because there's plenty of cars going past and they can't get away with it. But if somebody was to walk out from Guyra or Glen Innes or Langothan or Ben Lomond along the railway line, get far enough out of town that nobody could see them, who's to say they're not going to hop the fence onto the farmer's land and try and grow themselves a guerrilla crop of pot? And then who's going to get busted for the guerrilla crop of pot, which will no doubt be spotted by some other rail trail enthusiast, and they'll inform the authorities of its position and location, and then it's going to be up to the poor bloody landholder to prove that they didn't do it. I think, all told, this rail trail idea is a steaming crock of shit. It's been cooked up by people who don't own the land either side of it, and they want access to Australia for nefarious purposes. Who knows what they want to grow on other people's land, while allegedly looking at the pretty views. New England rail trails. Cargo cult stupidity. One of the worst ideas I've heard for a very, very long time. And do I have a personal vested interest? Yes, I do. My mother leases adjoining land to the 57 acres she lives on. I don't want to have to go out there and clean up the toilet paper and tampons left by the rail trailistas. Just like the Aborigines don't want people walking to the top of Uluru and doing a shit up there. I don't want people shitting on my mother's back fence. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.